When the inbound marketing works, I mean, it's kind of like careful what you wish for, because you can't get a ton of leads and then piss people off, and then you can't spend 30 minutes on the phone with everybody. Your sales guy might not know what you are, so you don't look that professional. So you got to have some ways to make sure your reputation stays up. And when you're doing well with SEO rankings, sometimes you end up getting a lot of bottom of the barrel people that are doing Hail Mary passes, and that's just part of doing well with inbound marketing.
Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 56th episode, we are going to talk with Phil Singleton, who's a web developer, SEO firm owner, and co-author of the book SEO for Growth. Phil came across my radar through some high-quality outreach that happened on his end, and he was a fantastic guest, one of the most natural conversations that we've probably ever had on this podcast. Now, since the past several weeks were what we call Jeffisodes, and I talked about specific areas of my growth as a marketer, I wanted to try something new with the interviews and start capturing that same sentiment in the interview episodes as well. So we focused less on Phil's journey, although it was really an amazing story that he told us, and more on his insights. And I think you're really going to like the way that it turned out. We hit the ground running once we jumped on the podcast recording, and we actually talked about 20 minutes before we even hit record. And we talked about all kinds of different things about our businesses, about marketing, and just growth in general. And then afterwards, we continued on for quite some time as well. He actually gave me several ideas that I'm looking to implement already. He asked me to review him as a guest on the podcast after getting off. And that's something I've never seen before, but it was pretty awesome. Actually, it was really good. I left him a nice review because he was a great guest. And in between, in our conversation, when we actually recorded it for the podcast, Phil and I covered a lot of ground. We talked about brands, small business marketing, and the many ways that you can grow in 2017 and beyond. I can't recommend this one highly enough. So why don't you give it a listen? Visit jeffalytics.com/Phil for show notes. Okay, we're here today with Phil Singleton. Phil, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, super pumped to be here. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you. We've had a little sidebar before we even recorded, and it was very valuable. So I think you're going to have a lot of value to give to listeners as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's start with the question that we always ask everybody, and that is, what made you get into this wild world of digital marketing?
Well, I took a super, unconventional path, but I think when it comes to web designers and graphic designers, it's probably going to be really different. But as I learn more about some of the guys that are specifically in SEO, it seems like a lot of them that have been doing it long enough kind of got here from different places or self-taught in some respect, and that's kind of how I got here. Actually, went to school, got a degree in finance, got a job right out working for an insurance company because it was the only thing I guess that was available at that time, and I was really happy to have a job. Basically the next week after I graduated. So, but I was there for 3 years. And just one day it hit me that I was, walking into a beige building with beige carpet and a beige cubicle with beige pants on and looking at guys that have been doing in there for 20 or 30 years. And I was like, I got to break out of this and do something else because it's not really my passion. And then even then, I was in my 20s, it's kind of like you start to make a decent living. And I felt like I was getting pulled down a career path that I didn't really choose, so to speak, or didn't really make a decision on this is kind of my passion where I wanted to go. It was just kind of happened to be there. And I was all of a sudden I felt like I was getting pulled down somebody else's life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I made this drastic decision to be like, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to pack my bags. I'm going to move to Asia and study an Asian language of all things. So nice. My parents literally thought I lost my mind doing it, I think. But I ended up deciding on studying Mandarin Chinese, basically. And instead of going to China, because back then, this is going 20 years ago or so, China wasn't a great place for, in terms of lifestyle. And I learned, hey, the guys, Taiwan's a more advanced economy. It's a nicer lifestyle living type thing. I'm going to go there. So this is 1990, let's see. Well, I guess it would have been it's late 1990s. And I went there. I studied. I ended up getting into grad school, coming back to the States. And then after grad school, I got a job that ended up taking me back to Taiwan, in Taipei, Taiwan. So, and I ended up staying there, I think a total of about 10 years. Wow. But yeah, I was working for a venture capital company, basically back in the .com era, that was helping North American companies get venture capital in Asia through Asian investment firms. And a lot of times there was like a business development deal on the side. So there you'd have like a .com company, and the Asian investor would want exclusives into Asia or something, or some kind of software or something like that. So they would invest to get some kind of exclusive rights. And we did that for a while. It was great. But then that initial .com bubble burst, and that career kind of went by the wayside. But what ended up happening, and what basically I think put me on the path to where I am today, is I started working with a company called 321 Studios out of St. Louis that sold this software called DVDX Copy. I don't know if you remember like Napster back in the day. This software version was kind of like Napster, but for copying DVD movies. I don't know if you remember that title, but it was sold in the States here for like 3 or 4 years and did really, really well. In fact, I think the owners that owned it, there were 2 owners that owned it, the last year of operations before Hollywood shut them down, it was like a $200 million a year cash business, right? So
wow.
I was helping him in Asia. I was running the Asian retail piece of that business. And what ended up happening is when Hollywood won the court case that they had with them that was going on for years, they had to shut down operations in America. And because it was still legal to sell this kind of backup copy under fair use rights around the rest of the world, it just kind of fell in my lap. So we were continuing to sell the software online in retail locations around the world, in physical stores, but most of it was actually being driven by online affiliate sales. I'd say 50% of the sales were coming from affiliate marketers, right? And this is going back again, like this is like 15 years ago. So
yep.
So here I am. I didn't really know much. Again, you saw on my pitch sheet there, I got a DA in computer science, didn't really know much about it. I was kind of a finance geek. A software company fell on my lap. I kind of had to learn a little bit about software and online sales just because I was at the right place at the right time, right? And I started seeing, when I started learning this business, I started seeing, hey, there's these guys that we were, writing commission checks out to for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a month, right? Because this is a $99 piece of software. They were promoting it on their forums or the precursors to like their blogs or article, whatever they're writing up, and they'd have advertisements on it. They click through to our site. The big affiliates would get 50% of the sale. And here I am. We have an operation in Taiwan with 25 employees, had hard costs, development costs, support costs, investors. Our piece of that 50% went down to almost nothing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, these guys that were back in the day probably paying like 5 cents or 10 cents, for AdWord clicks, and we're getting affiliate sales off of their, websites and this kind of stuff. We're just making bank, probably working, I don't know, maybe an hour a day or so or something like that. But it was a definite lifestyle. And now you probably remember that. Some people remember that back in kind of that early affiliate days. Just like, it was like a gold rush and people were making bank. But that really opened my eyes up, because even back then, I feel that Google was driving a lot of this. I mean, people were searching for stuff, how to copy stuff, where to buy it. It was all coming through Google at the time. And I started to kind of ask questions about SEO. How do we get up there? How are these guys doing it? Why aren't we showing up? And at the time, I had software developers and designers, and they had their own explanations, but they weren't business people. They really had no idea. Now that I look back, they really didn't know what was driving it, right? So I kind of had to dig in and figure out what was going on, and eventually I kind of got my head around it to where I had the pulse, and then I started to pick up things that were driving SEO, and that kind of took me on this path. Yeah. So anyway, Hollywood ended up coming around the rest of the world, changing the laws like they did in the States. We ended up having to sell what was left of that company. I moved back to Kansas City in around 2005, and ended up taking that experience at the global level, kind of early pre-SEO days, early SEO days anyway, and started to just apply it to this first website that I did on a barter, because I was moved back, bought a house. I had a nice payday. It wasn't like retire in my 30s and buy an island type of a payday, but it was nice to buy a house and kind of figure out what I want to do for a year or so before my passion really just kind of hit me in the face.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that software. I had definitely used that software at one point in time, and I had the same experience, or the same revelation when it came to SEO. I thought it was sort of like this thing that you couldn't, it was just like it happened, right? Google, something happens, and that's why search engines have the results. And
it just is, right? Yeah. It's just the way it is.
Yep, exactly. I was just like, oh yeah, this is just what it is. And I didn't realize that you could manipulate it, or not, maybe not even manipulate's the right word, but you could affect it. And then I went down this huge rabbit hole, like you're talking about, and just reading everything you could, and like, wow, that you can actually affect this, and it's not even that hard. basically you just have to do a little bit more than the other person. At least that's how it was back then.
I think that's how probably a lot of us got started too, because there just wasn't a whole lot out there. You had to like want to know what the answer is and have some tenacity and I guess some interest in figuring it out.
Yep. Well, and then there was like very few resources. So there's like maybe a few blogs, and we all probably read the same blogs. It's crazy how that was back in that market at the time, and now it's exploded. And it sounds like you basically were like, oh, well, this is the next step. And so you move back to Kansas City, and do you start doing it for yourself? Do you start doing it for businesses? What do you do next?
Well, I came back, ended up kind of buying our first house, and then I ended up doing something pretty cheesy. I'd always I lived in Asia, so we had a car for a while, but it was mostly motorcycles, in Taipei, which is like there's 10 million people there, so you're basically getting around, in cabs or motor scooters and that kind of stuff. So it'd been a long time since I'd driven a stick shift, so I actually ended up buying a Nissan 350Z, like a cheese ball. Mm-hmm. But I love driving a stick, and I got that, and I ended up taking it to this auto detailer, or the guy that I bought it from referred me to him or whatever, and he was just one of these back office guy, didn't have a good retail location. He was essentially selling these auto detailing services for like $25 or $50 to auto dealers. So he was making like next to nothing because that was his only channel. And I told him, I was like, dude, this is great, but you should get a website. And if you get a website and can reach consumers, you might be able to sell, retail for $200 or $150 and not have to like just, beg for the crumbs of the table from these auto detailers, these dealerships that were literally just always trying to shop around and get these guys to do these car preps for nothing. I ended up, 2005, knew nothing about web design. I literally got I think front page, and made a one-page website for this guy and applied what I knew to SEO, and his phone started ringing off the hook. He was almost crying to me on the phone how his life has changed, his business has changed, the phone's ringing. When I remember that phone call like it was yesterday, because I felt like that was like, now I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? I can make money on this, and there's nothing more rewarding than working with a small business and then having them say, you are having a positive effect on my business, or I can pinpoint growth to you type of a thing. Because it just pumps you up, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, now that's all you want to do. You want to get more people like this, and it just makes it really rewarding. So I mean, that's what it was for me. So at that point I was like, gosh, finally I found what I felt like my calling was, which sounds kind of funny, like somebody saying, oh, I was born to do web design and SEO. But I mean, it's really more, I think, the feeling and the connection that you have with entrepreneurs and business owners that really gets people like pumped up and makes you get up. And it's not like, when I had my insurance job, it was like the clock was like, every second felt like a minute. You felt like an 8-hour day was like just killing you, to crushing your soul. But now you do something that you finally feel like you love, and it's like you're waking up at 5 a.m. and can't wait to the day going, and it's like every day is kind of like fun, basically.
Yeah, so. I always love that too, because you're right. I mean, if you make more money for a big corporation, it's like, okay, well, the rich get richer, but then SEO and online marketing levels the playing field. So these small businesses can act like a big business. They can get out there and they can get results, and they can do it very well, and it can happen really relatively quickly too, without a huge barrier of entry. At least that's how it was. Now it's getting more difficult, but there's other channels that can do the same thing too.
Exactly. I mean, now it's like, I think a lot of them are buying into it, that the website's more than a digital brochure, and they're kind of getting that there's more pieces that goes into it. And I think that's what's happening. I hope that's what's happening. I mean, we definitely hear people, even the traditional businesses, are starting to understand. It's like, I don't understand. When I needed more sales, I would just do a TV commercial, a radio commercial, or more print advertising, but it just doesn't seem to work anymore. It's like, well, I tell them it probably is working. It's not working for you, because you're sending those people to the internet and they're finding who's the guy, because they have a web presence or a good reputation management, and you're creating the demand and they're stealing it from you. Is kind of how it's working. So I think more people are figuring that piece of it out. But it's not everybody. I mean, I still think this is like the golden age of inbound marketing, right? Because there's still a lot of companies that need help, and still people that are dipping their toes in it. Although I will say one thing that I see is like, how people snark at like millennials. I think the millennial business owners are like genetically engineered to be like the best inbound marketers, because I've got guys in their 20s that they don't know. If you start talking to them about like a trade show or a TV advertisement, That's not how we buy, man. Give me a killer website, give me social media, give me Google. So they're already that's just their world type of a thing. And they come in and they do this thing and they do it the right way, and they start stealing market share away from the guys that have been doing it for 30 years. And I think that's kind of, it's being a little bit disruptive. And I see it almost kind of like being how some of these, like the Uber and the Airbnbs and the ones that are getting in these traditional industries and getting at the point of sale on the internet and basically turning the industry upside down. Same thing's happening at the local level, where they're just, people are coming in and figuring out how people are buying and searching for stuff, and while the guys that have been in it for a while are still kind of fumbling around with the traditional and trying to figure out why it's not working.
Yeah.
You've got some of these younger guys coming in, and they look like they look like the one they've been around for 30 years.
Yep.
Yeah, the old guys have got like 2 reviews, and I got one tree guy that's got like 55 reviews right now, and he's 29 or something. He's just crushing it.
Yep.
But he looks like he's the guy, you know what I mean? Because he's just got that presence out there. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, it is. I've noticed that a lot too, and that is a lot of people who have been in business for a long time. It's so close to retirement that they're just like, I'm not going to learn another thing, or they don't trust it because they've been around enough times that they've had enough people calling them and saying, you need to do this, or you absolutely must do this, or you're going to be out of business. And I think when you've been in it for 30 years and you're still in business, like which one of those, like none of those things that they didn't do really affected them. But when you look at it as a cumulative thing, they didn't get very far then. Like they're losing out on all these opportunities.
Sure. And to your point, some of them probably maybe even have tried because they took a cold call from somebody that probably wasn't the best thing and was just looking for a quick buck, and then they felt like they got burned and,
Yeah, I got a lot of that.
Shell.
Yeah, I witnessed a lot of that, of people who would come to us, and say, well, we got burned, so we don't want to pay you for it. It's like, well, first of all, not my problem. Like, this isn't a charity. We have to be in business too. Second of all, here's how you won't get burned. But I think that you just need to realize that a brand in the modern day a brand is always a cumulative thing. But it used to be that you could just massively market, through TV or flyers or whatever, and that would be your brand or billboards. Now the brand it's similar, but it's a bunch of like smaller things you have to do. And so I think that it can become overwhelming for people to think about all the things they need to do or they could be doing to be successful. And yet the ones who commit to it and dedicate a little bit of time, it's clearly working. And so I think that's the hard part, is how do you translate that? And actually, I mean, how does a small business owner do that? Do they trust somebody like an agency? Do they hire a marketing intern? Like, what do they do in order to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, of course we know because we're in the business, so it's easy for us to be able to do due diligence and see who can do. And you would think for some of the digital marketing piece, people have the ability to go in, especially if like you're looking for SEO, right? Some of it to me seems like it should be common sense, but I guess it isn't. If somebody's cold calling you or cold emailing you on SEO, I mean, can't you just do a physical search, and make sure and double check and see what those, if they're actually ranking for some of the things that they're doing, or are they practicing what they're preaching type of thing. Of course, that's just this part of the business. There's other things I think that could, apply to too. But I mean, there's some of that. But one of the things that you mentioned that I think there's some room for debate or discussion on, and that is like what is a brand in these days, and how has it changed? Because part of me thinks, I used to try and tell people, and this doesn't go over very well, that brand or branding is dead. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think the old definition of what a brand has changed, because to me, part of a brand was, the old school way of thinking about it was, you spent all this time and money to get top of mind awareness, right? Yep. So that when people needed something, they thought about it, because they didn't have the internet back then. So you had to be either in the yellow pages, or you had to put a lot of stuff out there so that when people had the need, they knew about you or were familiar with your business. But now we've got things like the Google effect or the Amazon effect, where I literally go onto Amazon and I will buy from a company a large ticket item that I have never heard of before, because the social proof in the reviews is so strong, or maybe their web presence in other places are so strong, that I will buy over the old company or the other company that I've heard of that has a stronger brand that doesn't have the reviews or the social proof. Yeah. So the brandless company just got a big high ticket sale from somebody that's got the quote unquote old school brand all over the place. So does that mean that branding is dead? Has it changed? Does it just mean that it's now you got to factor in like this digital presence type of a thing, and authority and reputation management, all that kind of stuff? Or is it truly like dead? You can literally, I think like you said, I can come up with a company, as long as you focus on the right things, have a good website, maybe have good SEO, because I think a lot of people times will say or feel that high rankings aren't just high rankings. They're also an indication of you're there for a reason type of, kind of like you were saying, right? It's just there because it's there, or it's there because they picked you because you were the best choice.
Yeah.
It's not they're saying that, but there's some implication that you're up at the top for a reason, or so at least I'm going to put you on my, mental short list and check you out type of a thing. So,
yeah, for sure.
So I'm thinking the guys that show up at the top and have a lot of social proof and have a really good website that somebody's never heard of, can get the sale from the guys that have spent all the money on the traditional kind of route to building up a brand.
Yep.
And I think that's really different these days. And I think it's kind of exciting to some, but I think it also really irritates the hell out of the traditional agency model, because when you tell them a branding is dead in that respect, or it's different, they're just like, well, how dare you say that?
Yeah.
How dare you say brand?
No, it's a really good point, and I think it could be a debate because I actually think that is your brand now. I think the number of reviews you have, the rankings, the number of people on your newsletter, like all these things to me is what your brand ends up being. Like basically people that you've acquired who are interested in what you have to say, who have like subscribed to what you have to offer.
Agreed. Right? It's probably the definition needs to like change because it's just not the same as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I look at every person who listens to this podcast as a brand impression. Like that's absolutely a brand thing, because like they've subscribed to it and they listen to it, and then every time that somebody subscribes, another one comes in, the brand increases. Search rankings, all that stuff, newsletter. Like, so I look at it as I couldn't do half the things I was doing if I didn't have an audience that I built. And so maybe we call it an audience instead of a brand, but it's been like, that's, I think, the most important aspect of my business and many businesses that we take for granted. And that is that it's a lot easier to get people to buy something or to be interested in what you have to say if they're if they know who you are and they've subscribed to it. And also I actually just did a presentation the last 2 weeks about attribution of marketing attribution, and my conclusion ultimately was that basically marketing drives about 30 to 40% of your sales in general, and the rest of it comes from your brand name or from your organic, not organic search, but organic people who are going to buy from you anyway. And so when you think about it from that perspective, that's pretty remarkable, is that marketing really only affects 30 to 40% of the sales that come in. The rest of it is your brand, whether we like it or not, whether we want to call it a brand, whether we think that we should do branding or if we should just build value. That's where it's coming from.
Well said.
Yeah, it's one of those things that our tools don't tell us that that's what's happening. But as a business owner, you start to see these things and you're like, wow, if I didn't do any marketing at all, sales still come in. So how does marketing play into this? And what do we do to make it incremental? How do we increment it? And so it's sort of funny that's not always what the tools tell us, but that's really how it ends up happening.
Yeah, it's just weird how I think this changed. I mean, it's like you think about so you think about website design or website development, right? Well, even like the word website, it's not really that anymore. It's not just a site on the web, right? Now they're like marketing platforms. So when you say website, it sounds like a digital brochure.
Yep.
But they've evolved into these things where they're publishing platforms, and they're places where you've got your CRM tied to it, and you've got all these remarketing things, and you're publishing, you're putting your all these types of things on it. Well, that doesn't just sound like the traditional version of a website. Much in the same way that a brand doesn't. If you were to ask somebody to define brand, I think 99 out of 100 people would think about it the traditional way. Well, the brand is your logo, and it's the way people understand you on how you see it on your TV and your stuff, and the people. And the last thing they would start saying is like the things that what we think it sounds like it is. It's like, hey, it's your email subscribers, it's your online reputation, it's where you show up in search, it's your social media participation, your following. That's really where the branding is, because you can literally not do any traditional marketing and still go in there and steal it from the guys that are doing it because they're driving it back. So again, it kind of comes into these things where a lot of these definitions probably need to change a little bit because. And that's where it comes in with the business owners. Like, how do you explain these types of things? Because you can't, because when you're going in maybe pitching or selling against a traditional old school agency, and a lot of what those guys want to do is they want to sell them on the importance of you got to do the big expensive TV commercial because that's what's out there. That's what type of thing. Mm-hmm. And maybe they do. Maybe they go out there, but it makes no sense to me to go out and spend a bunch of money on demand creation and have that other side of the coin on the demand capture where you're giving it up to the competitors that do have like the online piece down, right?
Yeah.
Because like I said, I think the traditional advertising still works. Somebody always is going to have to go out there and create demand out there and build that one piece of it and go make the noise and say, hey, this is out there. But nobody goes from the TV commercial directly to the phone anymore. They go from the TV to an internet search to the phone or to the buy or whatever. And that's, I think, where a lot of people are missing it. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny. Like I agree with you. I think that TV absolutely has a place. It's just not it's not the center of everything, I guess. Like for example, when you see Airbnb running a TV ad, I think during the Super Bowl, and I think Google ran a Super Bowl ad. Like obviously these people are seeing value in doing that. So the tech ones are doing it, are doing these things, and they're seeing some kind of value in it. And it almost becomes novel at a certain point. But I think that doing the same commercial 50 times during the NCAA tournament or something like that, that's probably not exactly that there maybe isn't the best use of money. But who knows? I mean, that's well,
those guys they have both sides of the coin. They're creating demand. When they come back, I know I'm going to find all sorts of information on the internet. I mean, I have guys here that do TV ads, and they'll do them. And the first problem is that if they do anything, they'll mention their website. But to me, if you don't have a call to action on a radio or TV advertisement that directly, like, almost forces people back to the website, you're wasting a huge opportunity. One, right? Because they get them back there to get that traffic, to get that click, so that you can remarket them, do that kind of stuff. But the other thing of it is, I have people that go in there that spend a bunch of money on advertising, and they go and then people search their name, and they've got a 2.1 star rating. Yeah, you just totally killed everything because you didn't pay attention. You left your reputation management hanging in the wind to instead of being proactive about it, and they literally just wasted I think a big chunk of not all of or they left a lot of money on the table at least. By not addressing some of those online pieces. Because, again, I think everybody kind of goes online and says, well, these guys look good. Are they legit? They do a search, and all of a sudden, the site's not great. I can't find the site. It doesn't look good. Or they've got 2 reviews, and they're both bad type of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the interesting thing is that I think that every interaction is your brand, too. Like, I've been traveling the world, and I've been using Uber a lot and Airbnb. And it's funny, my wife and I noticed that we're cleaner when we leave the place because we know we're getting rated on the other end. Like we know that because of that, or Uber, we're more polite to an Uber driver or overly polite because you know that they're going to rate you or whatever. And maybe that sounds that I shouldn't be doing that, but that's sort of what we do because our if we get kicked out of Airbnb, good luck. Like we can't travel the world anymore. So it's sort of important that we get these like nice reviews and everything.
I love it.
On that end.
I love that mindset because I think that's how I treat every single one of our customers. I'm like, that person's going to be a review. So if we don't give them an exact experience, you have to work, even if they're going to give you one or they're not going to give you one, you have to assume that they are.
Exactly.
So,
well, that's what
treat them that way.
Exactly, and that's what your brand becomes is like, how do you treat people every day? Like it used to be that you'd have to be on your best behavior because there'd be these random people who would come in, like the shoppers, right? What do they call them? The secret shoppers.
The secret shop, yeah.
They would come in and look at the business and be like, oh, I heard there's a secret shopper coming around. Or there's the restaurant review critic who's the random person who would come in, at some point from the magazine and then write a review. And they didn't want to be treated, they didn't want to be treated differently. They wanted to see the typical experience. And instead of being one person that may come around and then that it's over once the review comes out because the magazine's been published or the newspaper's been published, now it's every single person has a potential to do that to you on a daily basis.
Exactly. Well, you're only as strong as your worst experience, so you gotta pay the a-hole tax probably once or twice a year because that's really what's going to define you at the end of the day is how do you turn those those sour ones into good experiences because that's just the way it is right now. You gotta have to suck it up. It's not like the old days where there wasn't any place to go, and if there was one, it was some offline BBB thing where you could actually go tell somebody to stick it. You can't do it now because you look at reviews are the way organic and reviews are pretty much the way we buy everything. And if you think about it, I think they're actually extremely rare in comparison to the amount of transactions that people actually do.
Oh,
I got a plumber. I got a plumber now that does thousands. He's the biggest one in town. The big thousands and thousands and thousands. But they've got 500 reviews. That's like a tiny bit of a fraction. It sounds like a lot of reviews, but it's actually not.
No.
I mean, 200 or 300 or 500 reviews on Amazon. That's a tiny amount of actual. So they're pretty rare. I mean, they're not rare when they're easy to get when they're bad, right? Because people are pissed off, they'll do whatever. But the good ones, it's really hard to do. But if you think about the conversion power that they have, because that's really what we all look at. I think everybody's got to be in this kind of review state of mind all the time, because then it really makes sure that they're on their best behavior, because you might as well be doing business like you're going to be on a YouTube video all the time. Because a bad experience is really what you're going to be judged by, and the way you handle it is going to just only make you better, type of a thing.
Yep,
so
exactly.
I actually think the two things I look at is that person's going to be a review, one, and I always am thinking about how stuff can help me on Google, basically. So you have this SEO mindset. It's not about ranking, but the way Google rank stuff now, it used to just be about tweaking your website and getting as many backlinks as you can, but I think they've gotten really good at taking a holistic view of marketing. So to me, I don't look at Google rankings as just this killer lead generation thing. Of course, that's a big part of it. To me, it's one of the best marketing KPIs out there, because if you're getting good targeted organic traffic, it means that you're doing the online reviews, you're doing good content marketing, you're participating in social media, you're doing all these things, and then Google's starting to reach out, figuring out how to count these signals and this traffic and rewarding you for it. So it ends up kind of becoming one of the ultimate marketing KPIs out there, in the same way that so again, I'm thinking think like Google does in terms of the way you run your business, and think like the person that you're dealing with is always going to give you a review, or you want a review out of every single not that you're going to get one, but you treat it that way. And I think those things really can help you calibrate in a lot of things that you're doing in your business to make sure that you're getting the most out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I like what you said there about how you take a organic search first mentality to almost everything. Is how does that's what a lot of us think, is I'll do this because it's going to get me a link, or every time I do a podcast they link out to stuff, or every time that I do this, or I do a guest post. And I think that is a paradigm that we think about, and that might be one objective of it. But I think that it's been proven in and out that the brand is even more important than the link, in my opinion. I mean, it might not be as important short term, but seeing somebody's logo next to on a publication that we all trust, seeing somebody having written for these areas, or seeing logos that they're on these logos, that helps so much with so many things that it's immeasurable. That people recognize your avatar, or that they've seen you search, things like that. That's extremely valuable, and it goes beyond just getting the link. We might get into something just in order to have somebody, because it might help our search rankings. But I think that in general, I've never really taken that approach, other than just knowing that if I do something, it might help me out. More than anything, it's how do I get the name out there? How do we get it to the point where, instead of doing outbound, having to pitch at conferences come to you and ask you to speak, that type of stuff. And I think that's one of the benefits of taking that search first approach, is that you think about it, what's in it for me from a search perspective, or what's in it for me in this thing, but then it leads to so many other things down the line.
When we're pitching or selling any kind of digital services, we tend to come back and bring it to SEO, only because it's Google's the one common denominator, I think, in all of small business right now. Because you'll talk to business owners and they understand Facebook, but a lot of people don't use Facebook. I mean, some of them will. Of course, a ton of people do. But I'm saying that usually a lot of business owners are like, I don't use Facebook, I don't follow it. But Google, everybody pretty much uses Google, right? So they understand return on investment. They understand that Google's out there. It's kind of the one common denominator on it. So it's not hard to convince them that you've got to have a chance to really grow your business, that you have to address Google in some way. So the cool thing I think about the way that Google's moved from, I think, just only waiting to the old school kind of backroom factors, is that you can now start to talk about SEO in terms of a more holistic piece of digital marketing. So all of a sudden now you're having the conversation, well, you do these things and we do this content marketing, this blog posting, it can generate links, which also help, but you're also able to get in, reach new audiences, generate some social signals, which has some advertising value and builds all sorts of other things. And they kind of start to see the big picture when you put it in that framework.
Yep.
And then, of course, as an agency owner, when you use SEO to kind of tie all the pieces together, it really puts you in a great place to say, hey, okay, now I've got an engagement for $2,000 or $3,000 plus a month, because now I'm in control of the website, which I think is the hub of everything, which is great.
Yep.
You position it in a way that you're the person helping them to deliver the content, the social media, maybe doing some of the outreach and stuff, maybe even doing some specialty things like helping them get booked on podcasts and those things. And that helps you get into those subscription things where you're getting an ongoing retainer. Of course, we're kind of getting now into maybe your agency listeners and that piece of it. But that's why, like, when came into this business from a finance piece, so I was like, okay, not super excited about doing web design because it's kind of a grind, I think, to do it the right way.
Yep.
But it's the one thing that most business owners search the most for, so it's a great way to have that. You almost kind of have to address it all the time. And if you position it the right way, in that it is a profit center and not a digital brochure and a marketing expense, but rather the part where you need to basically get that piece right, and that you're kind of the steward of it. Now you're in a great place to be the guy or the company to deliver, or at least to manage most of the digital marketing piece of it. So
yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, you mentioned like everybody understands what Google is and what Google does, and so that's an easy catalyst. And everybody understands what a website is and what a website does. And so those are two different ways to bring in, and just basically that you can get agreement with everybody that they make a lot of decisions from websites, and they find those websites from Google. And so it sort of sets you up for offering the other services on top of it.
Right. But what does it need to succeed in Google? Now you can start talking about all these other things and signals that I think do help, and then you actually are helping them with SEO, but you're also bringing so much more. Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing is, it's like SEO is like a byproduct of this like entire marketing strategy. So like the Google updates, the ones that penalize website owners for thin content and everything, those basically said, oh, well, you should just build a brand, or you should add value, you should create good content. And it's like a lot of people had known that for a long time, but it was sort of a wake-up call that that's really what you should be doing, is you should just make a website that truly provides value, answers questions, and makes people excited to be there.
You see just what you said. I mean, they treated them like a digital brochure. They were static things. They never invested in content or blogging or really doing anything. The site just got stale. And even if you see anybody doing anything active online, they tended to just take some of their best content and put it up on Facebook, where you got one shot and it just kind of died there, right?
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, we're trying to say, obviously, if it's a marketing platform, you put your best content on your website, you share that link out, you draw people back to the website, you can pixel them and tag them remarketing, you got a chance to offer a call to act. I mean, a lot of stuff that makes sense when you can explain to somebody in person, like, look, this is the reason you do it this way, and this is the reason why you got to spend a little bit of time in the way your website's set up, and you should do some ideal client research and some marketing strategy and some keyword research and bake this stuff into the website from the get-go, and not build a website and do SEO on it later, or do PPC on it later, or do social media, you know what I mean, type of thing. So,
yeah, I wonder how the market will come around to that, and if it ever will. And that is, like, I think that we still position it in silos, as in you need a website, or you need SEO, or you need social. And it's more like and that's what and again, that's going back to the brand piece. What people really need is they need to understand where they need to do regular marketing. What we used to call big M marketing, like what you'd go to a school, or you go to school to get a degree in marketing to do, and that was basically creating a market for your products and services. Is there ever going to be a point where businesses get that, or how do you have to sell them in on something like SEO? And
love that question.
Yeah.
I think my opinion, because I've seen this thing both done ways, right? So I'm part of the Duct Tape Marketing Group, and you got a lot of these guys that are in that group. There's 120 of us that are certified under John Jantz's Duct Tape Marketing Program. And so a lot of these guys, their websites are set up under selling basically marketing and marketing strategy, right? Which is really what most small businesses owners need. They need like a holistic strategy, and then they need to figure out what tactics to get into place and then tie them all together. The problem is, no business owner, at least because I have 3 websites here in Kansas City that I work on. I got a marketing website, like that's a duct tape style website, and I've got an SEO website services, and I got a web designer website. And people just don't search for marketing strategists.
Yeah.
They search for, oh man, we're getting killed here. We need more work. I need PPC. I need social media. I need a new web. They search for the tactics, you know what I mean? Because they figure, and that's where the lead. So, I mean, I think that's what ends up coming. I don't think really ever going to be a small business epiphany, because most of these guys that are running the businesses, they're in it doing it, and all they know that there's a problem because the phone's not ringing, and they go out and ask around what's working, and they just think of it in terms of like tactical band-aids. So our approach has kind of been 2 ways. One is we know that the people bite on the tactics.
Yes.
So we draw them in and we try and educate people. But then you draw them in, it always turns around into a holistic marketing package, because that's the thing that's going to get them 10x instead of 1 or 2x, right?
Yep.
So you got to factor this all in, because you can't just randomly start doing blog posts. You should build your website out. You should do the keyword research. A lot of times we'll do stuff where we're like, say, hey, you know what? Let's not just do random blog posts. Let's create a 10 or 15 blog series that then we can then send out as standalone blog posts, which again is great fuel for your social media distribution. And then at the end of 10 to 15 weeks, we stitch that together into an ebook. We put it up on Kindle as an Amazon Make You an Author. We get a nice call to action on your website. And again, it's the same type thing, but because you've got some strategy behind it, you didn't just randomly go shoot off 10 or 15 blog posts and distribute them. You thought about it. You worked on keywords that you wanted to get that you know were commercially viable, and then you also have done something in a way where you could package them together and repurpose it in a way that actually had some meaning behind it, and not just repurpose.
And you actually got some results finally.
But what ends up happening is somebody says, "Oh, you need a blog," so they just start randomly blogging, or they start randomly doing PPC, or they hire a social media person to start just randomly putting a social media post, and they say, "Well, this isn't working. I tried that, it didn't work." Well, it would have worked if you would have talked to somebody that was talking to you about your marketing strategy, your ideal client, and then rolling out the tactics based on that kind of stuff.
Well, it's an interesting paradigm, because I think that tactics are tangible. Like the result, like it's a tangible result to get a blog post. Like you can actually like physically embody that. But the strategy is often not. It's often nebulous, or it just creates more things to do, and people don't really want to pay for that, even though that's what they need.
And they probably usually have to pay for it, right? But I mean, it's like, gosh, like you said, it's not tangible, and it's like, I'm going to dump
an agency owner, like, do you want to provide that for free so you can get the results that they deserve, or do you build it into your pricing? Obviously, pricing, if you price it too high, then they might not want to do it. But then it's like, okay, well, if they're not ready for the strategy, then I don't want to work with them. I only want to work with the ones who can act on this. But I do love what you're saying, and actually I think that it's even more, like, the hard part is that even if you invest in like doing social media, just that's all you do, like, you're never going to see results for anything, strategy or not. You're never going to see results in the amount of time frame people think that it's going to be. So if you think that if you just start posting on Facebook once a day, you're not going to have tangible results for at least several months, more like years it's going to take.
Unless you get lucky,
even this podcast, like the number of listeners on the first episode was much lower than it is now. And it's basically every episode I get a couple more listeners, and then it adds up and it adds up. And eventually over time you look back and like, wow, this is great. And it wasn't any one thing that was a changing point. It was just that the fact that it was consistent, that people found it, and that they wanted to keep on listening to it. And so that's how you have to look at all these things. Like, the ROI of each podcast episode is probably 0, but the ROI of doing the podcast overall has been tremendous. And so that's people have that short-term vision, especially when they're engaging service providers, because they expect the service provider to be the Hail Mary pass, right? The ones that are just going to basically, that provider is going to solve all their problems, and they're going to do it for no money at all. Like that, how does anybody get that expectation? It's amazing.
Exactly. I think you bring out another point that I'm sure you felt before, and maybe at least some of the listeners are, one of the first things that we do when we're trying to figure out if we're going to work, at least as an agency, as a new agency client, is, are these guys going to look at me as a partner or as a vendor? Because as soon as they start asking for a bid or this kind of stuff, you're just like, oh, geez, they're just kind of trying to boot you around. Versus, I think anybody that's working you're going to hire somebody. First of all, if you're doing anything to hire anybody in any kind of digital form, even if you are just going for a tactic, which you should probably be looking from a holistic view, but I mean, you really got to look at those people more, in a partnership type view, and not as a vendor, because what you're looking for is, it's just hiring, like, to me, like you would be hiring any type of key position, and you're looking for expertise like you would be looking for in a CPA or a lawyer, not for a price point, because a lot of this is talent based, right? You're not just hiring, like turning on a faucet and getting a certain amount of digital marketing coming out of it, right? And you're going to pay by the pound type of a thing. So
yeah, that's fascinating. I never thought about it that way, but like, nobody ever shops around accountants for price. Nobody ever says, "Oh, I want the cheapest."
A cosmetic surgeon. Yeah. Like, how cheap are you going to be?
And I think the reason why wise because everybody realizes that they have, one, there's no real certification in marketing. There's certifications, but they're all, and I don't mean to undermine that. I mean, obviously you have one, I have certifications and everything, but there's no governing body that, that says I'm a certified public accountant or I'm a certified.
Yeah, there's definitely not one that would roll off of somebody's tongue like it would.
Yeah, exactly. And so yes, we have certifications, but they're not nearly as rigorous, or there's no central body to govern it. But then, like, the sales process for going to a lawyer or for an accountant is you say, here's the problem I'm going through, and they'll give you free consultation or either free or the first one's always free, like the first hour. And then they'll say, I can fix your problem. And then they'll be like, here's how it's going to, here's what it's going to cost. Here's all the billing. Like, maybe that's the approach we should be taking as marketing people. Is like, if we bring somebody in, like, hey, we'll talk to you for a while, or we'll talk to you for an hour, figure out what your problem is, and we'll tell you if we can solve it or not, and sort of treat it that way. But I think that when you try to compete on price, which many people do, it sort of undermines the whole thing.
Totally. So we try, but again, sometimes you still tell people, like, we'll tell people, oh, look, Google's got a video out here. There's a nice Forbes article that, do any kind of digital marketing thing. Usually you're looking at 4 months for minimal results, 12 months for more complete results, but this is a long-term play. We try and shift it over into return on investment and partnership type thing. You got to get people to believe in the actual, process. And not, but still, when you tell somebody 4 to 12 months, they nod their head and they're thinking 4 to 12 weeks, what I mean? Or they're thinking 4 to 12 hours or whatever it is, the phone to start ringing type of thing. And I've had that discussion before. We picked on a lawyer not too long ago, and literally, like, within the first month, they were like, I haven't seen our rankings change that much. It's like, dude, we just talked about this, type of a thing. And I think people they're small business owners. Everybody's got, pressure to get revenues up. And if they bet on you as a horse, you can understand that people still kind of hope for the best sometimes. Yeah. But you totally need to, I really try and vet that every time, because really just even from a wanting to like your jobs type of a thing, I want people to look at me with the respect of an expert, like I'm an authority, because I think I am and I have the best interests of their company. But nobody wants to be treated like there's some vendor that's going to get kicked around and just tossed if they don't like, you know what I mean? It's just not, there's no job satisfaction in that. So,
yeah, for sure.
To some extent, especially if you've got the inbound pieced in, I think people do need to figure out and not say yes to everything for sure, because you'll just end up driving you. But in the beginning, you have to give for my first few jobs. I think I did the first 5 websites I ever did were either on barter or for free, just to develop, 5 screaming people that I could refer, references that I knew that when I picked up the phone, they would say I'm the best thing that ever happened to them, right? Yep. So you got to do some of that in the beginning to make sure that you invest in yourself a little bit. But then once you get to a position, there's nothing like taking on a bad, a client relationship that's, I wouldn't say abusive, but there's no respect. It's not based on respect, or they don't see you. They don't see you as an authority. They just see you as somebody that's replaceable.
Yep. Or like, what am I paying you to do? That's that. Yeah, you don't ever want to hear that. That's not the type of relationship that is healthy, that's going to give the best results. Never. No, we could talk about this forever, because it's pretty fascinating, and obviously your expertise has been demonstrated absolutely throughout this, in how you deal with things. And so I like the way that this headed, but it's actually a little bit different than just going through. I don't know if I didn't get a chance to really ask you about what you do at your agency and what you specialize in and stuff like that. So if you wanted to share some about what you do and just some of your experiences, that would be great.
Well, so primarily, I built this business on web design. We do, unfortunately, we do people come to us, and if they're going to pay us, we start at $7,500 for a website, let's say, and our spots, we position ourselves as a boutique agency. So you're not going, say downtown here in Kansas City for a big agency where they're going to start like $75,000 or $200,000 for a website or whatever it is, because they're focusing on that upper small business range. But you're also not going to Craigslist or the one-off guys that are doing web themes for $500 or $1,000 or offshore, whatever, that type of thing. So we're kind of trying to do that middle market range. So we do some that are one-offs, but to be honest with you, when I don't get too excited about doing just a website project for like $10,000, because it's, we're looking for that ongoing relationship. We want to be their digital marketing partner. On the other hand, as we were talking before the show started, I think when you start to build up a little bit of a team, you got to feed the beast no matter how small it is. So, we do take stuff on just to make sure everybody's busy and that kind of stuff on the development. And so we do that. But one of the things I've done, because I think to some respect, there's different levels of success. I think we've built up a very successful small business here in Kansas City that gets a lot of leads, in some cases more than we can handle. And we definitely probably turn away, more work than some people would.
Yep.
Because again, we're looking for more ideal client type stuff, and we don't negotiate on the pricing at all. Here's kind of what we do, and here's the value that we add. So what we've done is I basically baked that experience and worked with John to package this book, SEO for Growth, and that's what we released late last year, and that became an Amazon bestseller. So basically everything that I've done, our whole process, literally down to some of the tactics that we do, is in this book. So I usually take the book, if we go to meetings with my sales guy, it's like, here's the book. Read this. This is our philosophy, and it actually has the engagement in it. So please read it, and you can do it yourself, or we'll do it for cheaper and faster than you could do hiring yourself.
Yeah,
probably better results type of thing. So that worked out. But the other thing that's really exciting about what we've done with the book is the whole purpose of it really wasn't to have the ultimate business card or to there's some win-wins on it, right? Like we get increased authority, and I got a bunch of cool people in the space that said great things about it.
Yeah.
What the excitement has been, and what we've done is we basically taken this and rolled it up into a licensing model where we've licensed it out to 15 agencies around the country. So the first thing that we've done is we set them up. We did one in St. Louis and one in Atlanta. So for example, if you type in St. Louis SEO, our licensee shows up number one for St. Louis SEO, and we've got St. Louis.SEO for Growth shows up for number one. So they come up with the site. We got a whole little website for them.
Yep.
It's got their own unique content. They get lead generation off of it. They get the authority of having some of the book stuff associated with it. So they're able to kind of jump in. So we did that in St. Louis successfully. Then we did it in Atlanta successfully. Then we did a webinar about 3 weeks ago, and we signed up, I think, 13 more cities around the country. So those guys are rolling out, and then we're basically doing this kind of a almost lead generation piece for some of these, marketing folks or web design people that have a little bit of trouble generating the lead. So I'm able to kind of scale out my expertise, I think, or my passion really in this area. Because as we were talking about before, I think I'm really good at some pieces of it. And I think the lead generation part of it, and maybe a little bit on the selling in person, I'm pretty good at. But there's other parts where I need all sorts of probably help with to try and bust into the next level. But this one piece we were able to kind of roll up into the book, roll up into a course and licensing model, and then we're starting to kind of roll out and seeing some success now over the country. So that's really that's how I've been able to basically take, because I can't take Kansas City web design, right, and open up offices around the country. The way that we've tried to kind of scale it out a little bit is to do this licensing model, and so far the initial signs are that it's really got some potential. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I like that model a lot. It's basically taking, it's obviously above and beyond what, the call of duty for many people or what we would expect. But it's sort of like a way of taking your success locally and then scaling it and then having an upsell, right? Like basically you always have to have something that you can do that goes beyond, I like it for many reasons, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I like the idea that you can say, I wrote the book on how to do this. I can,
That's good. I got a guy in St. Louis. He does marketing and web design. When he goes out and says, "Hey, by the way, SEO is also important to web design. Do a little search." You come up, and all of a sudden, there's some credibility on that piece of it where they can establish some authority, show that they know what they're doing, and maybe even help them get that angle into the retainer, which is really what I think the key to all this is, trying to figure out ways to get the ongoing subscription on higher type things, right? So that's really what my model's been the whole way. Is I've tried to I don't want to sell $500 a month because those are the smaller clients and they tend to be more difficult. If you start charging $5,000 or $10,000 a month for SEO and digital marketing, they want a pound of flesh and they want you there weekly. There's this really cool little sweet spot in the $1,000 to $3,000 a month where you can get these larger small businesses that will kind of leave you alone if you get the results and show them some value. And you can maybe get 100 or 200 of those with a super small team and make a killing. Whereas if you start going for $10,000 a month retainers, you're only going to get 10 of those, and they're probably going to be pulling your hair out because they're going to want you in the office.
Yeah, for sure. Well, exactly. I agree. I mean, obviously having 100 clients is not the easiest thing in the world to manage, but I think that you're right. I mean, that's a sweet spot for a lot of agencies, is to have several clients who are just grateful that you're able to give them the results and to make it that way. I couldn't agree more.
Really appreciate this.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great. I really enjoyed talking to you. I know we're getting a little bit over our allotted time. This is awesome. This has definitely given me, actually, I love your licensing idea. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that myself at some point in time. But that's
sweet.
I'll put that in the pile of good ideas that I can't act on right away. But this is great. So I look forward to, even offline after this conversation, you and I chatting some more. And thanks a bunch, Phil. I really appreciate you sharing your
Thanks so
story
much.
with us.
This has been one of my favorites. Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Well, that was an awesome conversation. Phil and I covered a lot of ground, and I look forward to continuing to build a friendship with him in the future. Now, if you like this interview, let me know what you liked about it. Maybe even leave a review for this podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. I know I haven't asked for that in a while, so hopefully some of you who have been listening can talk about it and share it so we can get good ratings, show up in searches, all that fun stuff. Phil, thanks for the chat. I've already left you a review on Google Maps. It's a brilliant follow-up, by the way, that you say, hey, can you leave me a review? I really like that tactic, and I'm planning on stealing it. For show notes, visit jeffalytics.com/Phil.